employment, and if they were for that, people would be again dying of hunger. Well, I want to say that that's not true. There is one purpose behind the World Bank pushing, and the IMF pushing these countries to produce this type of food or to have this kind of economic growth. They want people to stop producing food. Before the Green Revolution in the 60s, people were producing food. And they will stop and say, well, we are going to have more food with chemicals, with large irrigation systems. We are going to have more food thanks to that, thanks to the corporations. But the reality was the United States wanted to export all the food that they were producing. They needed to have markets for that food. So they stopped these countries from producing their own food. They stopped growing to be self-reliant, to become dependent of that type of production for the corporations. So nowadays you see countries like Mozambique, like Sri Lanka, like what happened in Mexico in 1984, when they were told, stop producing your own food, that we are going to produce the food cheap for you, and then you just produce food for export, and that's one way to create employment. But the problem is, yes, they create employment. And in the maquila sector, like the lady was talking about in Central America, they produce clothes for us cheaply, and they create employment, yes. But at the expenses of what? Like she was saying effectively. Women have been contaminated. The wages that they earn is pittance. Nothing that they can live with. So you can see that what is the benefit of having that employment. But what happened later on when the whole trade changes? What happened, for example, in the flower sector? In Kenya, was a boom with the flowers. But capital moves. That is the problem. Capital moves wherever they want, wherever the corporation wants. So now, the boom is leaving Kenya. It's going to Ethiopia. It was in Zimbabwe before, and they moved to Kenya and then to Ethiopia. What happened with the workers? What was the employment? Now that's why in Mozambique people went to the streets. Because the food prices got so up and they don't have employment. So the myth that the export-led industry is going to create employment is just for a tiny bit. And what employment? We need to think about the wages. We need to think of how these people have been treated in those plantations or in those special that they produce in the clothes that we use here. We're here. So that I just wanted to go back on that, because we need to understand how the whole food supply works, how the whole supply of commodities works, and that don't believe that people in the south are going to be benefited because they got employment. They already have. It's better to have your own land and produce your food and be able to sell than having an employment that treats you like a slave. I would say this is independence. So I think, and this is down to economics as well. It's down to politics that the governments in the south they don't control even if they want, and when they don't want, they are also co-opted with the IMF and the World Bank. So let's don't call ourselves to lies in that point. The other point that I want to make here is that the food sovereignty is not far away from us. We need to see that this is happening day by day. Here in the UK, in other countries, and people are fighting back. There are examples that is working. In Sri Lanka, people are producing their own food. But what happens is that if we don't fight the big corporations and the big institutions, like the WTO, if we don't go to the government here and say, stop your idea about food security, stop your idea that we are going to produce more food with genetic modified. In February this year, they launched the report on how they are going to manage the global food crisis. And the idea was with the so-called Foresight report, that if you want that you can read it. They are talking just again about genetic modified seeds and sustainable intensification. I don't know what that monster is. You know how you can compare one thing with the other or join one thing with the other, but they are doing it anyway. So this is the approach of the UK government. We need to fight back to that. Like we are claiming here in this occupation to regulate. Well, we need to hold the government to stay accountable for this kind of policies. And this is what we need to, every time that they come back with issues, we need to fight back and say, we're not going to accept this. And support all the initiatives that are happening around the world, but also here in the UK. People are taking land, and then people also are producing their own food. We need to continue supporting these people. This is why I just want to finish with those ideas, because let's don't think this is far away from us. Or let's don't